All right, welcome to the A's Philosophy YouTube channel. I am A's Philosophy, and tonight we have a very special event. This is actually the first debate. Ray, could you? I'm sorry, Ray. Let me mute you for a second. Yeah, there we go. This is welcome to Ace Law. We have a debate. This is the first debate that has been hosted on the Ace Philosophy YouTube channel, and I'm very happy to have the two debaters join us tonight. They are Objective Ethics and Ray, and they will be debating the question: is objective morality best grounded by naturalism or theism? So that is going to be the question of the debate. And this is how it's going to go. We are going to first introduce our two debaters. Actually, they are going to introduce themselves. Then I will give the format of the debate, and then we will have the debate itself. And then there is an after show that has already been posted on my YouTube channel. And after this debate ends between the two participants and after the Q&A session, which there will be, we are going to move over to that. And that will be for people who watch the debate and want to interact with whoever is there, and we can have a discussion there as well. But okay, so let's get started by introducing our two debaters. We will start with Objective Ethics, and then we will go with Ray. So Objective Ethics, please take a minute or two just to introduce yourself to the audience and say anything that you feel is important you think you would like them to know.
Very good. First of all, I'd like to thank Ray for coming and participating in this. He actually offered me to debate him, so I'm just responding to that. And I'm grateful that he reached out to me because I think this is an important topic that we're going to be touching on. I'd like to thank A's Philosophy for hosting this, and he's been great. I've been on his channel before, and he's done a great job with his channel, opening up dialogue for people that don't always see eye to eye to kind of find some middle ground. And it's just a really good resource for people. I encourage people to subscribe to his channel and to follow him. I did want to make it clear to the audience that I am not here to deconvert anyone. I am an agnostic. I'm not an anti-theist by any stretch of the imagination. I do have a problem with the biblical version of morality and claims that Christians make about God's objective morality, and I intend to show that there are flaws in that line of thinking and there are actual dangers in that practice, that we see harm coming from those kind of ideas. We've seen it throughout history, and I intend to demonstrate that tonight. I am also arguing for an objective morality coming from a naturalistic viewpoint. Now, I did not invent this concept. It goes all the way back to Aristotle and other Greek philosophers. It has been adopted by Christian philosophers such as St. Thomas Aquinas. So this is not a revelatory thing that I'm actually going to talk about. I hear a lot of skeptics say there's no such thing as objective morality, but I think they are attacking that from the biblical standpoint, which I agree does fall apart at that point, definitionally and practically. But objective morality from a naturalistic standpoint is certainly a viable theory, and I will be giving you guys my theory the best way I can articulate it. But if you don't like my concept of it or my definition, you can certainly do the research, which I encourage you to look into this, because this has been around for many, many, many hundreds and hundreds of thousands of years. So I will, at this point, go ahead and turn it over to Ray. Thank you.
And Ray, introduce yourself. Again, anything you feel is relevant for the audience to know.
Thank you. Yeah. So for myself, I am looking to convert people whenever I do anything in the ministry, and I do count this as such. I'm an evangelist. I preach about hellfire. I preach that you need to stop sinning. And myself and A's, we do agree on a few things, and I've been on 4 to 3 times with him in discussion format, debate style. I'm thankful to do something on morality. I do think it's the most important bit of the whole life of Jesus, because he taught it, he lived it, and he conquered. So in doing so tonight, all I just want to do to say before anything opens in statement is that we have to have law, we have to have truth, and we have to have morals. They have to be in harmony. And that's what I'll be discussing myself. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you both for those introductions. Ray, when you're not speaking, I'm just going to have to mute you because there's a lot of background. I don't know what it is, but I'm not doing that to like obviously silence you, but just to eliminate the background noise. I hope you don't mind that. All right. Again, so we're now that the introductions are done, we are going to move to the format. Again, the question of the debate is objective morality best grounded by naturalism or theism? And I think in the case of Ray, he'll be presenting Christian theism, but I will leave that to him. The format is this. There will be 15-minute opening statements for each participant, starting with objective ethics. Now, you don't have to use the entire 15 minutes. That is a maximum time limit. So if you feel you've said everything you need to say, you can yield your time before, in less than 15 minutes. But you will have up to 15 minutes. Please try to now the 15-minute max is for fairness, so please try to respect that. When I say 15 minutes, if you go that long, please just be wrapping up your thoughts right there and trying to go too far over. I'm going to be kind of strict with that. After the up to 15-minute opening statements, there will be a 5-minute time period for each participant for uninterrupted responses. Again, please try to respect that. You don't have to use the entire 5 minutes, but you have up to 5 minutes. After the 5-minute uninterrupted responses for each participant, there will be a 40-minute, basically moderated dialogue. My job during that time frame will to be ensure fairness, that both participants are basically having an opportunity to direct the conversation at points and get their points across, and that it'll be a productive dialogue. I ask both of the participants to. I don't think that we'll have a problem, but let's try to be respectful to each other. Try to realize that the point of this is to have a productive conversation for the audience as well. Try not to overtalk too much. Obviously, trying to get into ad hominems or anything like that, or attack the person. We're attacking ideas, not people. So let's try to keep that in mind and just be professional and civil and all of that. And that will make my job a lot easier. After the 40-minute moderated dialogue, there will be 5-minute closing statements for each participant. Again, that's a maximum time limit. You don't have to use the entire thing. And then after the 5-minute closing statements, there will be a up to 30-minute Q&A from the audience. And I will try to keep track of questions and things like that as they're coming in. But during that time frame, maybe I'll be looking in the comments more for questions at that time. After that, I am going to close this stream. After the Q&A, I'm going to close the stream, and we are going to move over to an after show, which is I've already mentioned, which is linked on my YouTube channel. And people can basically join a panel and we can go up to maybe an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours, depending on how people are feeling. But that'll be another opportunity for people to interact if they so choose on a panel or in the chat. All right. Now that the format has been given, we are now going to start the debate. And Objective Ethics, you are going to be going with your opening statement first, and you have up to 15 minutes. And I will start my timer when you begin to speak.
All right, thank you very much. I just want to go ahead and start by giving the very quick theory of basically how I surmise this objective morality from a naturalistic standpoint, what I'm talking about with objective morality. Premise number 1, anything that comports to reality is an objective truth. Premise number 2, morality requires action and is the active pursuit of well-being. Premise number 3, well-being is the greatest possible reduction of harm in any given imposition of free will. The conclusion is well-being is tied to morality and does comport to reality. Let me start again. The conclusion is well-being is tied to morality and does comport to reality of maximal harm reduction. Therefore, objective morality is true. So what my opponent is going to be talking about tonight is about God's objective morality. However, that statement is illogical because we know what the definition of objective and subjective is. Anything that's subjective is that which is dependent on the mind. And for references, biblical references of how we know that God, the Christian God, has a mind, you can go to Psalms 139, verse 17, Isaiah 55, 8 through 9, 1 Corinthians chapter 2, 16, Romans 11, 34. oftentimes Christians will say, well, God's mind is different than a human's mind. Unfortunately, it doesn't work that way when you go to the Bible because, for example, God changes his mind. You can reference Exodus 32:14, Numbers 23:19, Jonah 3:10, 2 Samuel 24:16, and on and on and on. What we do find about the biblical God, both of them, the Jesus God and the Yahweh God, is that they have the exact same trait that every single God that's ever made by men, which all gods are made by men, and that is that they are all anthropomorphized. They walk, they talk, they think, they have a will and a position, and they impose their will. And this is all falls under the definition of subjective. This is in no way logically objective. What my opponent is going to do is use logical fallacies known as the special pleading fallacy to assert that the mind of God is somehow different than every single mind and therefore cannot be subjective for one presupposed reason or another. However, my opponent cannot avoid making a special plea in order to wrangle in his assertion that God's mind is objective and therefore God is objectively moral. Rules for thee, but not for me, is what we are going to hear a lot of tonight. What we see in reality is that this highly anthropomorphized God is anything but moral, no matter what metric of morality you hold. I would argue that my definition of objective morality, which I will lay out during this debate, holds that it is a universal constant, for example, that murdering children is immoral. But the God of the Bible is whacking babies left and right, such as in the global flood myth, reference Genesis chapter 6, verses 6 through 7, or when God tells Saul to kill the Amalekite children, reference 1 Samuel chapter 15, verses 2 through 3, or when God tells the Israelites to annihilate everyone from the land God is giving you, reference Deuteronomy chapter 20, verse 10, which is exactly what we are seeing in real time over in Gaza right now, or what we have seen throughout history, as in such with the Crusades when they were fighting to regain the promised land, quote unquote. That's the land that God supposedly gave them. Or when God commands Israelites to stone disobedient children to death, reference Leviticus chapter 20, verse 9. So it is well known that God condones slavery. That's been making a lot of traction lately. So look at Leviticus 25:44-46 before you start calling it indentured servitude, because this is not the chattel slavery that's described here. Here we get specific instructions from God on how slaves could be obtained from the surrounding nations and foreigners living among Israelites who would become their property and passed down as inherited property. This is chattel slavery. You could reference Dr. Josh Bowen, who wrote a book, Did the Old Testament Endorse Slavery? Updated and Expanded Edition, 2023. We are all familiar with the story of how God sends Absalom to commit sexual assault against David's wives, who were themselves sex slaves. Look up what concubine means. Reference 2 Samuel chapter 16, verses 8 through 23. Also, God says to the prophet Isaiah to kill babies and rape women. Reference Isaiah chapter 13, verse 16. What are the dangers of Christian morality? Christian morality promotes harm, slavery, bigotry, sexism, flat earthers, and science deniers. Christians believe they are justified to judge the behavior and lifestyles of others based on the subjective standards laid out in the Bible. Christians will attempt to tell you that the law is temporary, the law has been done away with, such, but the law is permanent. Reference Exodus 12:24, all of Psalms 119 really, but in particular you could look at verses 44, 142, 144, 151, 152, Matthew chapter 5, verse 17 and on. Jesus talks about the law not being abolished. Now you're going to see, of course, the logical contradictions coming into play. You're going to see violations of the laws of logic, such as, did you guys disappear here on me? A's, are you still there?
Yeah, I removed me and Ray. Sorry about that. Just go ahead. Keep going. You're good.
Okay. All right. Sorry about that. So where was I at here? What you're going to see from my opponent tonight, as I mentioned before, are logical contradictions. You're going to see things like the sharpshooter fallacy, special pleading fallacy, circular reasoning. You're going to see violations of all the laws of logic, the law of identity, the law of non-contradiction, and the excluded middle. And this is going to be a theme that happens when apologists attempt to defend things like slavery or sexual assault against women or murdering babies, et cetera, so on and so forth. I think that is probably good for my opening statement. I'll yield the rest of my time.
All right. Yeah, I'm sorry I did that, Objective. Since this is the first debate, there's going to be production issues. I just realized that I could just put you on the stage in the middle of your opening statement, so I hope that wasn't too much of an interruption. I do apologize for that. But
no worries. It just threw me off. I thought you guys dipped out on me, and I thought, oh, he ran away already. I'm just getting started.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry about that. But yeah, okay. Thank you for your opening statement. So now we are going to put Ray on the stage, and I'm going to remove myself and Objective, and he will have up to 15 minutes to give his opening statements. Again, he doesn't have to use all of it, but again, okay. So Ray, after Objective I leave, I will start the timer on your first word.
Okay, great. Thank you. So in my opening statement, what I would like to confirm is that before we see man start to even consider what is moral, whether it's good, whether it's evil, there is God, and there must be truth, and there must be a law of truth to be able to discern good and evil. So when we look at things, for example, that are not of themselves sin, but yet can be sin, such as certain sexual acts, then we know that there is someone governing the action. Now, if someone just goes about to explain morals objectively by nature, then at that point, what you end up running into is every time that person has ever done anything evil by their own objective standard, they themselves now have to believe nature is evil, or they themselves and or are inherently evil. Now, claims will be made against the God of the Bible. However, though, that does not mean just because it's a popular opinion amongst quote unquote Christians, it does not mean that every Christian believes in this exactly. And if someone who comes to objective morality through nature demonizes the God of the Bible, then what are they then following themselves? When they do something that's evil, they follow the same product of their own mind. So there are exact morals that we know by nature. Like, for example, what is brought up a lot of the time in something like this, killing someone. Okay. Now, the question is there a law behind this? Because for the most part, you'll have people think it's okay to commit abortion in our society today. It's okay to have capital punishment, so on and so forth. So without law, without truth, you're never going to make it. For example, before day 6, to our narration, before there was any man, any woman, 1 + 1 was 2. So there's truth. You can count 2 days, you can count 2 animals. As well, we know that there's something, someone, of course, but even if you're just by nature following objective morality, there is something unseen, and in my case, someone and someone's, because if someone like my opponent, who by nature understands morality, they say objectively, have they ever been tempted to do something that they would consider evil? If they have been tempted to do it and they said no because it's for the well-being, because of reality, then who tempted them? So we need to account for that as well. And as well, if what we are doing is making such an appeal to judgment, from whence did we get the truth to be able to judge? So this is why when it comes to Jesus of Nazareth, he is before all things, and by him all things consist. He came under the law. He was made of a woman, made under the law. He taught the law of Moses perfectly. He lived it. He authored it. He abrogated it. Now, many false claims will be made, as we have already started to hear. And of course, it's only fair to deal with those in rebuttal. Though you have to be able to see what he taught in the perspective of a Jew, and then therefore go from there. Because again, without a standard of law and truth, morals then just become rather subjective. And then what happens if you are indeed wrong in your application of good and evil? And again, is there anything at stake? Is there anything at risk? Is there anything higher that you could appeal to? Because you're making the appeal that there is nothing higher. How do you know for sure? And then therefore, why is it that men fear death? And then if they do not fear death and they don't know what's going to happen after they die, then they must be deceived. So at this point, I will yield my time because I think it would be best to get back to just simple discussionary ways that we'll have shortly after we do responses. Thank you.
All right. Thank you for the. Ray, I'm just going to mute you. Sorry about that, Ray. Thank you for those introductory statements. We are now going to move to uninterrupted responses. We will have 5 minutes for each participant, and we are going to start with objective ethics again. Once Ray and I jump off, I will start the timer on your first word.
Okay, now when I get into some of these, Ray, you had mentioned some things previously in chats, but not in your opening statement. So I'm going to ask a few questions about some of those things, but if you don't feel like addressing them, then I certainly can respect that. That's no problem at all, okay? All right, since you didn't say no, I'm going to go ahead and run with it.
Objective, this is a 5-minute uninterrupted response. So you can respond to what Ray said, and then after, yeah, sorry about that. So
I misunderstood.
Okay. I'm sorry. Yeah, you have 5 minutes to basically respond to what you heard Ray said. Then he has 5 minutes to respond to what you said in your opening. Then we go to moderated dialogue. Sound good?
Very good. Yeah. Okay. So just a couple things I did notice then. Thank you for clarifying. I apologize. I haven't done a formal debate since high school. So this is really, I'm really nervous, to be honest with you. This is all new to me. So, okay. So just a couple things I noticed that you use the word in the Jewish perspective. However, that's not actually how an objective standard works. Objective is good in all cases. So it wouldn't matter what the Jewish perspective is. But I think I'll go ahead and actually use that in a cross-examination to have you maybe further flesh that out for me. And I'll go ahead and give up the rest of my time.
All right. Thank you for that. Okay, so that was objective ethics response time. We are now going to hand it over to Ray, who has a lot of feedback in his mic. I don't know if you can solve that, but Ray, why is there's a lot of like some sort of muffling sound in your microphone? I don't know if there's an issue. Can you hear me, Ray?
Yeah, I can hear you just fine. So I'm not sure. I got nothing on in the background.
Okay. I think it's only a problem when you're speaking, it's not a problem. So I'm gonna have to deal with that. But there's some serious problem with your microphone. Hold on. All right. I had to mute you, Ray. I'm sorry. You're having a really serious audio issue, and the problem is it only manifests itself when you're not speaking. So I'm gonna have to basically continually mute you and unmute you when you're not speaking, unless you're able to resolve that on your end. But anyways, you have a 5-minute response statement, and I will start when you begin your first. By the way, yeah, go ahead, Ray.
Okay, yeah, I think you cut me out there, so I wasn't sure. All right, so in my 5 minutes, what I would like to bring up from what my opponent said in his opening statement is that he certainly demonized the God of the Bible in cases, no doubt, when he talked about God telling someone to rape someone. I mean, that is an absurdity. And then he mentioned something about the law going away when we as Christians, we uphold the law of morality from the time of Adam to all eternity. So again, when we discuss Christianity, we have to be extremely particular. There is so many false Christians. Jesus has said this prophetically, that most and many that say, Lord, Lord, will not make it. In fact, he has never known them. So to base it off of false Christianity and to really open this up just for skepticism, it doesn't make any sense to me because I thought we were talking about objective morality. So what my opponent did was he just went on to be a skeptic of the God of the Bible. So I mentioned the rape situation makes no sense. Now, the death of children, for example, the flood of Noah was brought up. Okay. So if God were to take children to himself, because I mean, this is what people say, they went to a better place. They might be an atheist, they might be agnostic, they might just say it to make someone feel better. But see, we as Christians believe this, that if a child dies, they go to a better place. So what has God done wrong? So this is why we need objective morality. We need the truth. We need the law behind it. Okay. Because if not, you're going to get what my opponents got going, which we still have not really heard what he even means by gaining morality from an objective standard through nature. Again, it's not going to make sense, especially when he has said many things evil already, because he has lied according to the text of what the Bible says. The Bible never says that God told someone to rape someone. I mean, it just simply is not true. Now, my question would then be, where does that thought come from? Because if he were to think someone believes a God that does something like that, that tells someone to do something like that, I mean, does he believe in invisible evils, evil beings that, tempt, who persuade others to believe something like this? I mean, this is something that he does have to account for, and he does have to be held accountable for what he has said. So there's other things that I brought up at short. For example, the law, whether we're talking about there's no law now, or what is this, a false view of something the Apostle Paul taught. Trust me, we know very well what it says in Romans chapter 3, that they uphold, they confirm the law. Okay, so they establish it. That's what the apostles did, and they could do so without the Mosaic law. Now, many times, and we already heard other skepticism surrounding the law of Moses, but again, we have Jesus of Nazareth who taught under the law of Moses, who says, do unto others as you want done to yourself. So is the law and the prophets. So again, if you're not going to believe Jesus, then you could skepticize. However, though, for anyone listening, because my opponent said he's not trying to mess around with your faith, okay? But for anyone listening, don't listen to what he's saying, because Jesus teaches the golden rule is the law and the prophets. So when you read the law and the prophets, don't be a skeptic, okay? Go by the truth, go by the law, and that's where you'll find the morals, because it will harmonize. There's no way Jesus was wrong, and there's no way the Bible is being corrupted to the point where it teaches that God is telling someone to rape someone or something of the sort. So use the morals that you have, and you do have to be objective with that, because of course we're all created equal. Okay, so if we hear something like the God of the Bible is racist or Zionist or something like this, we should know better. Okay, so what is being done here is, it's a sleight of hand. Let's make no mistake. He doesn't want to mess with your faith, but he already has started. He is a respectable person in conversation, and him and I were able to engage to have this conversation, but we have to see what the enemy is doing. I'll yield.
All right, perfectly timed, Ray. That was again. It's going to be difficult to manage that audio issue. I don't know what the problem is, Ray, but it will be an issue going forward, because whenever you're not talking, there's a really loud, apparent muffling sound. So I don't know. We're gonna have to see if we can work around that. But
can Ray just mute and unmute himself so that you're not risking cutting him off? Because I'm able to do that.
Yeah, Ray, how about this? Going forward, because of the audio issue, every time you stop speaking, you're going to have to mute yourself. And then when you want to say something again, you're going to have to unmute yourself. So that's going to be really difficult to have a free-flowing conversation like that, but I don't see any other way, because otherwise no one will be able to hear what objective ethics is trying to say. So that's just what we're going to have to do. It's going to be problematic, but let's see if we can manage to pull that off. Anyways, okay, we just completed our 5-minute response round. Now we are going into a 40-minute, basically moderated conversation slash cross-exam, if you want to call it that. It's a little bit more loose. How about this? Let's start with objective ethics, kind of driving the conversation for the first half. And then, I'll keep a timer on 20 minutes. And then after 20 minutes, we'll kind of change gears and kind of let Ray drive things. But for the most part, you two just kind of do it, try to work out your ideas and the points that are on the table. Sound good? All right, objective ethics. How about you get things started by asking Ray, questioning Ray about what his views are and what he said.
Sure. I guess there's a few places I could start. First thing I think I should probably do, in fairness, is get Ray's interpretation of this scripture. So when you read Isaiah, let me see here, chapter 13, what you get is a prophecy against Babylon. This is where the oracle comes to Isaiah and tells him what the word of the Lord is, what is God's word, right? When you get to chapter 16, their infants will be dashed to pieces before their eyes, their houses will be looted, and their wives ravished. So what do you think that means?
Okay, quickly though, just to deal with the sound question, I'm doing nothing different than what I've done the last 3 times I've been on your stream, so I'm not sure exactly. So I will hit the.
How about this, Ray? How about this, Ray? Sometimes, let's do it this way. Sometimes if you leave the studio and then join again, that will resolve audio issues. So let's try that. Click, go.
Also, really quick before you leave, I don't know if you've done this before, but there is a setting when you log into the studio, when you have your microphone settings, there's an echo cancellation setting. Make sure that's selected.
Yeah, let's try that first. Ray, if you go into the StreamYard tab, sorry to have the audience to have to bear through this, but we really need this to get resolved because it's not going to work otherwise, or it's just not going to be as good. Go into the StreamYard tab, go into the settings, go to audio, and see if the echo cancellation option is selected. See if that has an effect. And you're muted. So wait, after you do that, oh, okay. I guess he wanted to try the route of rejoining the stream first. So let's. I'm sorry, audience. I've had Ray on my channel before, and like he just said, he never had audio issues like this in the past. So this is a little bit surprising. These are the kind of the technical issues that unfortunately might arise. So let's give Ray a minute to join again. And okay, he's back. Let's see if all right. Ray,
Okay.
just hold on.
Yeah,
Ray,
it was on echo cancellation, so it definitely is.
all right, let's check. Let's just sit there for like 5 to 10 seconds and let's just see if we hear anything. All right. It sounds good to me. I think the issue has been resolved. So that's excellent. All right. Now that the audio issue has been resolved, let's move to the 40-minute moderated cross-examination. And we will start with basically objective ethics leading the way with the questions and just see if we can get a flowing conversation from there. So take the lead. Take it out, objective ethics.
Okay, so again, when we were talking about this comment you made, that you said that it doesn't say anything about God commanding rape in the Bible, and again, I'll refer to Isaiah chapter 13. You start at the very beginning of the chapter, you get the context of the chapter. This is certainly God speaking. When you get to verse 16, their infants will be dashed to pieces before their eyes, their houses will be looted, and their wives ravished. So what does it mean when wives are being ravished?
Well, my point was in my response to your opening statement is that this is just a prophetical word of what will transpire. This is not God telling anyone to rape a woman. And that's why I said what I said. So I hope you understand where I'm coming from. So this is a prophetical saying.
So when God says this will happen, was God wrong?
No, God knows the future.
So then it did happen.
Yeah, I believe that there is utter destruction of Babylon in the text, and there's no doubt about that.
What about the part where it says specifically that the wives will be raped or ravished, as they put it? Did that happen?
Yeah, no, and I've said that. My point was, dear sir, is that this doesn't say that God is commanding, say, like Isaiah to go rape a woman or something of the sort. It's not saying that.
What about in 2 Samuel, where God sends Absalom to sexually assault David's wives as a punishment for David's sin?
So the case with Absalom, again, this is God telling David what will happen, but we know quite clearly that God has never sanctioned polygamy, and it's in the law of Moses that they are not to take multiple wives, that is the king. So what is going on here is God is speaking to us and telling us that he is going to allow this to happen. So Absalom was the rotten one, and he did this, and then God is saying that he's allowing it to happen, and it brought shame to David. That's all God is saying. God is not in any way capable of taking away someone's free will and then causing that person to sleep with David's wives. What you're doing is you're going into Calvinism. That's a hard Calvinism, consistent Calvinism. And I think this heresy. In fact, people that believe that, I think, go to hellfire.
Another question I had for you is, you mentioned that children go to heaven, right? The babies
Yes,
that
sir.
are being killed in the flood. So what's wrong with abortion then, if this is an objective standard?
Because nature itself should tell you that if you are against the taking of life, you should not support those that take life. If God makes lemonade out of lemons, all glory should be given to God.
So when God kills the babies, is that making lemonade?
No, God is taking the baby to himself. God gives breath. So then, especially in the culture that we are in, they're killing babies. And maybe you think God is behind this as well. This is good that someone like yourself, if this is what you're going to believe, and I have to say this with all fairness, if you're going to support abortion, it's better for you not to have children, that God should take these children back.
So abortion is actually a very difficult topic, and I don't have a set position on that, to be honest with you. It's a very difficult one, I'll grant you that. But my question is the inconsistency, the special pleading fallacy that you seem to be making. It's lemonade when people kill babies, but it's not lemonade when God kills babies. It's just God bringing his babies to him. I'm confused about that.
Well, this is why I was saying in my opening statement, we need more than just morals because we cannot mishandle them. So we need law, we need truth. So life has to come from the unmoved mover, if you will, right? We need ideal soul, life, and these things, and that for eternity. So if God gives life and we're in God's image, and a child were to die who is innocent, who does not have the knowledge of good and evil, of course God is going to take the child back to himself. This is only what we would expect. Now, though, if someone kills a child, we are never to look at this as good, because if we indeed care about that person doing that evil, we should tell them not to do it. You see what I'm saying? This plea that you're making is that we should be thanking someone for killing. Well, then what is the point of your morality? How is it objective?
So the objective morality is the reduction of harm, the maximal reduction of harm. So it's, you'll come across many situations in life where you have two things that you're comparing side by side, and both of them are actually harmful. The most moral thing to do is going to be the thing that reduces the most amount of harm. Unfortunately, that's just the way life works. We aren't always in a black and white situation where one thing is going to be moral and one thing is going to be immoral. You can have two immoral things and you can have two moral things. Whichever is going to be less immoral is going to be the thing that reduces the most amount of harm, according to my worldview and according to the natural view of morality.
So then why don't you condemn abortion?
because it's difficult to say that for two reasons. First of all, I don't necessarily know that I have a set position on when a fetus actually becomes considered a life or an autonomous being. So what you're doing is you're comparing what we know is a life and is an autonomous human being, which is that of a woman. And we're saying we're going to dictate what she has to do with her body, which is slavery, as far as I'm concerned. And slavery is highly immoral, according to my worldview. So that's where it gets really sticky. When the science comes out with a definition of when we actually determine what life starts and when life begins, that's when we can come up with a fair measuring stick of when it's actually immoral to commit abortion or not. It's more immoral to commit the abortion versus telling a woman that she's a slave.
Well, I think what you introduced to the proposition was politics, and that's not what I was trying to bring into this, because I'm not political. But my question is why don't, because you said what is moral, what is immoral, and then, okay, if we have to decide, what's the better way to go? Well, if you're undecided, okay, and I'm just going to use your stance, why don't you just condemn it? Because you know very well you came out of a woman.
I know very well what? I missed that last part.
That you came out of a woman.
What does that have to do with condemning abortion? I'm not making the connection.
Well, because when you came out of your mother's, stomach, you look the same way you did seconds before you came out. It's obvious. If you want to go by nature to get your morality, this is an obvious point. So this is an easy one.
I would agree that late stage, I would agree, and I think most secularists do agree that late stage abortions are immoral at that point. Then that would be murder, and murder is going to be more immoral than slavery. At that point, we're talking about seconds before I come out of the womb. But at what point does it really, the point where it becomes looking just like I did when I came out of the womb versus looking like I did 2 months into the pregnancy are completely different. So there's a real, like I said, it hasn't been determined scientifically as far as I know. And when it does, then that's the standard that we should use, because ultimately how human beings interact with what is moral or immoral is going to be subjective based on every single human being. It doesn't mean there isn't a moral code. The same thing applies to how Christians interact with what they consider to be God's objective morality. You're still using your own subjective standards to determine what laws you're following, what laws you're not following, what laws you value, et cetera, and et cetera. So the subjectivity is not the question. The question is there an actual objective standard? And what you haven't addressed about my opening statement is how have you come to an objective standard? And you also mentioned something about the unmoved mover. Can you demonstrate that there is a need for an unmoved mover?
Yeah, and this is what I was trying to put forth, is that you say that it's subjective, but what you're going into is the conscience, if it is exercised to discern both good and evil. Okay, so yes, to you, it might look like I got one way, the Catholics got one way, the Calvinists has got one way. However, though, there is actually only one way, because even you very well can tell that certain things aren't right. My point is that there's got to be a law, there's got to be a framework. Okay, so there's got to be an absolute truth. So even in, like, if I just go back to what you started with abortion, you were then willing to admit seconds, maybe a day, okay, late stage, so on and so forth. You admitted that was condemnable. Is that correct?
Yes, I think that's most reasonable.
Okay, so then at that point, did science tell you that, or which one, or politics?
I would say that's through science and observation. I mean, like you said, you are a functional human being. You can be pulled out of a pregnancy, or I'm sorry, induced, not you or I, because we're men, but a pregnant woman can certainly be induced into labor prematurely if there are health reasons or other medical reasons for that, and that baby at a certain point can survive. But there's a point where an induced labor will not produce a baby. That fetus is not a viable baby. You can only induce it up to a certain point prior to the pregnancy.
Okay, so this is part of my point, because then you asked me some more questions and I want to be fair, and please re-ask them if I don't get to them, because it is your time. So if we have the unmoved mover, then he sets the standard. Okay, that's what I'm saying. And I'm saying there is conception, and that's where the life starts. Now, I understand that's not what you believe. However, though, that would make sense because then if we go from a day before, you just go a day before, a day before, a day before. A woman knows that she's pregnant. How does she know? Without getting all technical, you know, I understand that. I'm not trying to say you're a doctor or something, but you get my point, right?
Well, I'm not quite connecting all the dots. I know how a woman knows she's pregnant. Yeah.
Okay, so there is something that has changed, and then there is conception, and even whether the doctor is a creationist or a skeptic, they can't deny that. I mean, it's fair, right?
Well, they can't deny that she's pregnant, but again, this seems to be a bit of a straw man on the issue. What does a woman being pregnant have to do with when we define what a fetus is actually a life?
Well, that's why I asked.
Because honestly, I think the standard that I laid out as far as when you can successfully induce the pregnancy prematurely, I think that's maybe a good place to start. Again, I'm not a doctor, and I have not looked deeply into this issue, so there might be other better criteria that I'm simply just unaware of. The one thing I am aware of, though, is that telling a woman what she has to do with her body is immoral. That's a fact that we cannot deny.
That is political in our culture, but I believe God has the right to do that because that life.
Well, let me just, since this is my time, I'm sorry, I don't mean to be rude, but since this is my time, I do want to get into some things because you've made a lot of claims, but these things, as I mentioned before, these claims actually boil down into what we call logical fallacies. So could you please explain to me how it is that God can command not killing babies, but then God kills babies? Because we can certainly agree that the global flood killed babies, I assume, right?
Absolutely is.
Okay, so let's start with something easy. How is it that God is morally justified to kill babies, but tells us that we are not morally justified to kill babies, and not have that be a special pleading fallacy?
Okay, and I would agree it is your time, so you were not rude by doing that. Now, though, the point is, and I made this point as well, is that if you are comparing it to, say, abortion, okay, which it seems like that's what you're doing.
No, I'm comparing it to I'm not comparing it to abortion. That's something that you brought into the equation. I never brought up abortion. I'm talking about killing babies. So if I take a rock, or let's say I just take a baby into the bathtub, let's just go tit for tat. Let's say I take a baby into the bathtub and drown it, and I'm immoral for doing that. Of course, that would be a horrible thing to do. But God is not immoral for drowning babies. So how can you get around the logical fallacy?
Okay, so it's not a logical fallacy based on what I said because it's not fallacious. The point is, logic tells you if God gives life and he takes life back to himself, there's nothing wrong with that. If what you're doing by drowning the child to death is you think you're sending them to heaven, then you must believe the God of the Bible, or you believe in some God because you believe there's heaven. And how would you know for sure if you don't believe in God?
Just to hammer down so I don't forget what you just said here, because this is very important. So again, you've introduced another double standard here. So the mother brings the baby into the world. You're saying God brings in life and he can take away life. The mother brings life into the world, but you're saying she can't take away life. So again, you're just introducing more fallacies into the situation, this double standard, this special pleading fallacy. So can you please explain, without making a claim or an assertion about how God brings life into the world and God can take life into the world, explain how that's actually not a special pleading fallacy? Just making the claim doesn't actually provide any, it's not even an argument, frankly. I mean, aside from the fact that you have to demonstrate this God, which we're going to get into possibly later, but these are all just presuppositions that you're making and claims you're making, but you haven't demonstrated how this actually is something logical. You're saying God is logic and God is logical, and it's a logical assertion, but I haven't seen any logic coming out of this argument yet. All I see is fallacies. So can you please explain without how it's not a logical fallacy without just making an assertion?
Yeah, I can give you an example. For example, if, and we'll just go by if, right? If there is a God that has a standard when it comes to parenting, okay? And part of being a parent is you're not allowed to kill your child, okay, in our questioning today, right now, in our time. However, though, you are allowed to discipline them, okay? Now, if your neighbor comes up and tells you, if you're allowed to spank your child, I'm allowed to too, what would you say?
What would I say if my neighbor said that he could spank my child?
Yes, sir.
I don't have children. I'm not sure what I would say. I would probably say definitely not. I don't even know if spanking children is a good thing to do, but I don't raise children. So this analogy is kind of falling flat on me personally. But what is ultimately what you're getting at here in this analogous relationship? Because I'd like to focus on is specifically the drowning of babies and not spanking children.
I understand, but what
Yeah,
I'm trying to,
let's let Ray save your questions maybe for a few minutes. Objective has 3.5 more minutes to lead the conversation with questions. So let's try to save those questions for your time, Ray. Sound good?
yeah, I would definitely answering his though.
Yeah, I'm okay with it. I feel like he's attempting to, but he's attempting to draw analogies. And the problem with analogous relationships is they're always going to fall flat. If they didn't, they wouldn't be an analogy. They would be the thing they were describing. So let's try to focus on what we're actually talking about here, which is the drowning of babies. So how is it not a logical contradiction? Okay, specifically a special pleading fallacy, where God can tell people not to drown babies, but then God can drown babies. Let's just really focus on that specifically.
Well, like I had said, I mean, if you are the one that gives life, I'm not sure why you feel as if they're not allowed to take it. Because even ultimately in the abortion, without any politics, it is God that is still taking that child back to him. And that is what is happening. So there are people that try to kill themselves, okay, and it doesn't even succeed. Okay, so again, my point is that if God allows you to breathe, then
I'm sorry, brother, but you're making the claim that God gives life. You haven't demonstrated that. You haven't demonstrated anything, and what you haven't done is explained how even if God is the one who gives life, that somehow that gives him the right to take life. And even if we use your abortion example, like I said, the mother gives life to the baby, the mother and the father collectively, but the mother certainly carries the load there. So you're saying that she can't decide to have an abortion, even though she's the one giving life. All of these examples are falling into special pleading fallacies, and as far as I can tell, they're falling flat. So let me ask another question. And you mentioned the prime mover. Can you demonstrate, and you could take up the rest of my 2 or 3 minutes or whatever's left here. Go ahead and demonstrate how the prime mover is actually necessary.
Yeah, in all due respect, the way I was trying to answer your question was about the morality base, not trying to prove God, because I thought that's what we were debating. So I wasn't trying to.
Yeah, no, I agree, but you introduced the prime mover as a response to the question. So I'm talking about the morality. You're talking about politics, which are just because we make political decisions based on what we observe to be morally correct. And I agree. And this is a perfect evidence for objective morality, because laws tend to conform to the real world that we're living in, not theological dogmas. We've done away with that. Now, we started out with theological dogmas, but as society is progressing and evolving, we're doing away with that to a more secular type of law. And that is evidence that there is a objective moral code that every human being, regardless of whatever the religion they are part of, can identify and resonate with.
Yeah, that sounds more like relativism. But I mean, do you want me to handle what you brought up before that, or do you want to go into that more?
No, I'm good. I appreciate you letting me interrupt you a couple of times, because I was trying to kind of make the most of this time, and I wasn't trying to be disrespectful or dismissive of you. So thank you for your generosity there, and I'll go ahead and concede the rest of my time.
All right. Well, okay. So now we are going to move into basically Ray will be kind of leading the discussion. Again, I didn't want to, I hope I didn't, create a problem by jumping in there for a second. Y'all are doing good. But now Ray will kind of be leading the conversation and asking questions. But again, y'all are doing a good job. Basically, just keep up with that, and let's go forward. All right, Ray, what do you got?
Okay, yeah. So to be as well reciprocal with the generosity, I'll stay somewhat on the topic, and then that way we can maybe get a little bit more out of it. So I asked the question. I know you say you're not a parent, but like you also did provide at least a partial answer. You thought at least about my proposition that you, if you were a parent, and then someone else maybe who's listening could maybe gain from this, and just put yourself in the position that you would feel as a parent, you have some sort of way in which you could discipline your child that your neighbor is just not allowed to do, because you have a responsibility. Now, my question for you is, if you want to oblige, is where did that responsibility come from? And this would be as pertained to the unmoved mover.
Okay, I'll do the best I can to not filibuster this, but basically, if I'm going to attempt to put myself into the paradigm of this analogy, I certainly can agree that I would have a standard for how to discipline my children. If my neighbor disciplines my children and it falls within the same standard that I would discipline my own children, then I have absolutely no problem with that. If the neighbor is, if I say, let's say, for example, I do not think it's a good idea to beat my children or to spank them or whatever, and my neighbor sees my child doing something that we both agree is wrong, but he decides to spank my child, then no, I would not accept that because that's a double standard.
Okay. And that's, for the most part, all I am saying is that God grants you space, but only to his own parameter. And that would not affect the fact that the global flood happened, because again, the child is actually going to a better place, and God has told us that. Whereas someone that commits abortion today, that's not what they care about. They care about themselves or being selfish. Okay. And the reason why I brought up politics, because I'm not political. I'm not trying to take away someone's free will. All I'm trying to do is express to you the judgment of what is going to happen based off of their free will choice.
Fair enough. I'm actually a politically independent centrist myself, so I'm neither left or right. I can agree with issues from both sides of the aisle. That's just how I think most people should be. But this two-state, this political system that we have right now is completely broken. So I can agree. I think we can probably both agree on that.
Well, I think it's a sin to vote, so I'm really not a nationalist. So, okay, so let me get back into my time. I hope you at least took my try for generosity to at least, get to the bottom of the point in some respect. Okay, so I do appreciate.
Do you feel my answer was appropriate, or did you need more clarification on that?
No, it's fine. I think the viewer could understand both of us in the fact that you did see that you had something granted you from the outside, because your neighbor is not allowed to do the same thing you are. You have a governing source, but what is the source? Now, you maybe say you don't know. As an agnostic, I say I know.
Well, I think you misunderstood me. It's not that my neighbor is allowed to do something I'm not allowed to do something I'm allowed to do. That's exactly the opposite of what I said. What I said is my neighbor is allowed to do exactly what I deem appropriate that I would do myself. It's when my neighbor steps outside of what I would do that's when it's inappropriate. So I think
yeah. No, I agree. Yeah, I agree with what you said. Yeah, and okay. I think you use morals to understand it because you have the moral obligation and the requirement over your children.
I agree.
Yeah. So that goes to show you that there's something outside of both you and your neighbor, because you guys are not in the same position.
I agree with that as well. I'm not opposed to objective morality whatsoever. I completely agree with you.
Right. Okay. So that's a good maybe segue here. So you don't have to tell me. The last thing I ever want to do is get into your personal life. I never even asked you if you had kids. I just asked you the hypothetical to start with. I do appreciate you sharing, but you don't have to. All I'm asking is for the hypothetical, because I brought it up earlier. If you have ever done anything evil, did that come from nature?
So I don't actually believe in evil. So you'll have to define what you mean by evil.
Something immoral.
I have done something immoral because I'm a human being, and no human being is perfect. Every human being commits an immoral act. So because all life is valuable. Okay, I do not believe in human exceptionalism. I believe that's been pretty well debunked by science and psychology, but I know a lot of people do not necessarily agree with that. But let's just focus on the human aspect of things. So I am heavily involved in the martial arts, right? I used to work as a bouncer at strip clubs and whatnot. I was heavily involved in the adult industry, and I've been in more than one street fight. I've never started a fight in my life. I'm not a pacifist, okay, but I'm more than willing to defend myself. Is it immoral for me to punch somebody in the nose, even in self-defense? Yes, it is. Okay. However, it is less immoral than what they're doing because they are initiating the combat. Do you understand what I'm saying? So every punch I throw is justified because it's in self-defense, even though we're both throwing punches. However, we are both engaging in immoral activity by getting into a street fight.
Okay, so that's fine that you shared a lot of different things there. That's okay. I understand. So what I would like to pronounce from this and what you just said is, you said that because we're human, we do things immoral. So if we have the fact that you're trying to ground objective morality on nature, are you saying nature itself has just the faculty of immorality ingrained in it?
Exactly right, because what we're talking about with morality is well-being, and well-being comes down to the harm reduction and the imposition of free will. So as soon as we start to impose on people's free will, right, as soon as we introduce harm, that's when morality, and this is an action. Morality is all about action. So you cannot have an immoral thought, for example, okay, but it's an action. And once we institute action into the scenario, then our action is either moral or immoral.
So, and this is part of my point overall, is that if nature itself, under what you have just said, correct me if I'm wrong, has immoral ingrained in it, did that come from a process over time of unfolding, or where did that come from?
I don't know. It would have to come from the time that life started, because nothing inanimate can be applied to something of morality, right? So when we look at the earth and we see that the dinosaurs are living happily, eating each other, some dinosaurs are eating plants, and a massive asteroid crashes into the Gulf of Mexico and eliminates the dinosaurs, wipes them out, right? This isn't a moral or immoral action, even though that action predicated the evolution that allowed you and I to be here today. There's no morality tied to that, even though there's a benefit. There's also a harm, a great harm that happened, but it's the asteroid has no intention, right?
Okay, so sticking to more of where I'm trying to go with this is that you also said that we are human, we do things immoral, and then you said that no one is perfect. How can you prove that?
Because we all have the same nature, and I've never seen it demonstrated otherwise.
Well, but you also said we have free will, so you have to then know everyone's choices. Or does free will even exist if you're inherently partially immoral? Because are you saying it's 50-50 split in nature, or what are you saying as far as moral and immoral?
I don't think there's a metric, a 50-50 metric, because I think there are many things that can happen that can be immoral, but we do not have necessarily a choice in the matter, such as in self-defense, for example. So I just think that everything must be judged on its own merit in a case-by-case situation. So
what you, sorry.
Go ahead. No, that's good. I don't want to filibuster. Go ahead.
No, it's okay. If you need things more to say, go ahead. In this situation, what it sounds like to me is you just said that you will use your free will to do evil based on the way you responded to your bouncing before or street fighting, because you said it was immoral, even in self-defense, to punch the guy in the nose. Did you say that, or did I mishear?
No, you're exactly right. That is immoral, even in self-defense, to punch somebody in the nose.
Okay, and it sounded as if you also said that you had to defend yourself. Did I get you correctly or no?
I chose to defend myself.
You chose, but do you have to do that?
Certainly not.
Okay, so maybe you misspoke or I misheard. Okay, thank you. So again, I go back to the question. If you have free will and you could choose what is right, it sounds like we're on that path together, then how do you know everyone has gone at some point in their life choosing what is immoral, even under your framework?
All I can do is use everything that I have observed personally, and of all the human beings that I know well enough to actually have a decent understanding of their choices they've made in their life, people that I've interacted with, etc., have never shown me to be perfectly moral. Now, if you say it's possible that somebody can be perfect and perfectly immoral, then I would ask that you demonstrate that. Because if I say there's no pink unicorns, I can't demonstrate to you there's no pink unicorns. If I say there's no perfect human being, I cannot demonstrate to you there's no perfect human being. All I can do is demonstrate to you that every human being that we seem to interact with is imperfect. So I would, in all fairness, I know it's your time to ask questions, but I would consider, do you know of any perfect human beings that you've actually interacted with personally?
Yeah, Jesus Christ.
Okay, so can you demonstrate that Jesus Christ is walking around somewhere so other people can interact with him?
Well, he's at the right hand of God the Father, and it's well documented in history, and it's in what we call the Word of God, and it's far more knowledge than what you know about your peers or your neighbors or those that you fight with and different things.
So by well documented, can you actually demonstrate? Because there's lots of documents going around there that aren't based in reality. That doesn't actually. But again, this is your time for questions, so I'm sorry.
Well, no, but see, the problem is that you started with the claim that you used almost a genetical standard that because we're human, we do something immoral. So then I would then go back to you're trying to teach objective morality from a naturalistic perspective. Why would anyone believe it? What's the point of believing it if it's got immoral ingrained in it?
That's what I'm having a hard time following you especially when you bring up someone like Jesus, who is pretty violent as far as I can tell, just reading the Bible. Now, you mentioned throughout history, so I don't know if there's other things in history that I'm missing, but when you see about how Jesus got violent by clearing the temple, when Jesus says, I did not come to bring peace, when Jesus says, sell your cloak and buy a sword, I mean, these are not pacifist statements by any stretch of the imagination. So I'm just not making the connection that you're making to this perfectly moral person here suddenly.
Well, I think to start with, what I had just said is that you're not offering anything for the better. You're offering something ingrained in nature that is, without a metric, as you said, has immoral ingrained in it. I've already condemned the Calvinists. I'll condemn anyone that thinks we're born a sinner. I've done that for years. So I'm not partial to Christians. Now, as far as Jesus, because I brought up Jesus and you just have, and then you asked me to demonstrate. Okay, so do you believe that Jesus existed? Was he not claimed in outside biblical history?
I'm literally 50-50 on it. I can be convinced either way. I think there's good arguments to be made for both sides. I know there's a lot of gatekeeping when it comes to the, biblical scholarship. And so people like Richard Carrier get ostracized and blacklisted. Robert Price is another double PhD biblical scholar who supports mythicism. And I think there's good arguments to be made for the mythicist position. So it's really difficult for someone like myself to really make a determination one way or the other.
Okay, so you would just have to deny history in total then to deny Jesus existed, but that's just my claim. So if I go to Jesus from what things that you said, as far as the swords, you misrepresented the text, because what are two swords going to do for 11 men? Do you think that was the point of why I say you took the swords, or are you just using it to try to win an argument?
No, I think two swords is going to be far more beneficial than 12 cloaks.
Well, it was for 11 men, and it wasn't used for starting a war because those apostles never fought back, my friend.
Well, fair enough. I mean, Jesus did tell them to buy swords. So swords have a purpose. So that's.
I was just cutting down a garden myself earlier today for a job. I needed something sharp.
Yeah, but you didn't use a sword. A sword is a weapon that has a specific purpose and a specific intent. Is designed for specific use.
He also sent them out without staves initially. What do you think about that part?
Sending them out without stabs initially?
Yeah.
You mean when he sends out the 12 or the...
Yes, sir.
I think that there are a lot of contradictions internally within the Bible, and I think that sending them out without a staff doesn't mean that telling them to buy swords is any refutes that or shows that that's not actually a problem.
Okay, so we're talking about objective morality. So he laid down his life, and the apostles did so as well. He taught. If you think it's a contradiction, that's fine. But he taught you will also taste the cup, and they did. So my question is, they did not fight back. They were pacifists. And as well, in the Bible, that God, he does destroy, and I would agree with you, he destroyed those that offered their children to Molech, which you also said was immoral. So would you uphold the God of the Bible for the Canaanite conquest of those that were committing bestiality and giving their children to fire? Would you uphold the judgment of that?
No, because the Israelites were doing the same thing. They were worshiping, sacrificing children as well. This has actually been pointed out by several biblical scholars. But I'm sure you would not agree with that interpretation of the Old Testament of offering the firstborn, the first fruits and such. But it's been argued very effectively by biblical scholars as far as I'm concerned. We see other references. I believe it's in Ezekiel where God talks about, I could be getting it wrong, may not be Ezekiel. I don't want to misquote the Bible because I've been referencing it very accurately so far, even if you disagree with my interpretation. I don't want to just throw something out there, but there is one of the prophets, I want to say maybe Ezekiel, but somewhere in there, God even talks about how when he gave the law, he knew that it would be something abhorrent to them. And I think that's a reference to what he's talking about with the sacrifice of children. So no, I don't think the Israelites were any better personally.
Yeah, so the Bible is crystal clear in the position where I'm referring to, that God says specifically that the land will vomit you out as well if you do what these nations did to get vomited out. God has no respect to persons. The Israelites were often destroyed for their sins. So are you suggesting that God is a Zionist, the God of the Bible?
Well, I think Zionist is a loaded term, and again, we're leaving politics out of this. What do you mean exactly by Zionist, just so I can work within your paradigm?
By what you're saying, the Israelites were no better, which I would agree with you when they were no better. But is it fact that God destroyed them for the same deeds? And will you uphold the judgment? Because you are coming back with the fact that they were no better. So if they are no better, are you okay with judgment against immoral acts?
So the judgment, I don't actually believe in, because I don't believe that this God actually exists. So what I'm seeing is men making claims, not a God, not God. But obviously we're talking about God's morality here. So again, what I'm seeing is God doing things that he tells people not to do. So that's what I'm focusing on. What men do amongst men, is really, as I'm not quite following it. Is it good for men to kill people for doing the same thing that they're doing? No, I don't think that is good.
Well, initially, Israel tried to go in to conquest the Canaanites, and they weren't successful. They're actually warned that God's not with them because they were in sin as a nation. So they already did not have any partiality, any favor of the face or nothing. So my point, though, was to you, are you okay with judgment against immoral acts? You can leave God out of it.
Yeah, definitely no. It's not. I don't have any problem with judgment against moral acts. The problem that I have is how we dispense that judgment. If we're going to be claiming to have some kind of moral superiority, if there are people that are, sacrificing children, and you have a powerful army, is going in and killing them the only answer, or can you go capture them, enslave them, not enslave them, but put them into prison and then educate them, teach them better laws? I mean, there are just a lot of hypothetical scenarios that we can come up before we just start slaughtering everybody, in my opinion.
Okay, he gave the Amorites a lot of time. This was first mentioned in Genesis 15. So that was at the time of Abraham. So we're talking hundreds of years. So if you want to approximate, you're going to go over 430 years. So my point, though, is, and I appreciate your answer, and I understand your...
Sorry to interrupt. Time is basically up. So maybe ask one more question, and then Objective answer the question, and then we're going to have to end the moderated dialogue. Sound good?
Yeah.
Yeah. If you would like to answer, that's perfectly fine if it's over time. So basically where I was going, sir, is that if indeed he gave them a lot of space, which does, somewhat fit along with what you were saying, should we imprison them, so on and so forth, you can leave the God of the Bible out of it. My last point here was, if you're okay with judgment, that's fine. If we have objective morality, what goes past that? At what point is it okay to have judgment in prison or, capital punishment? Well, leaving politics out of it, I get it. So my point is, objective morality, there's something preceding that if we're using our minds to try to figure these out and have these conversations, which are important. What is going to be the judge of our judgment?
So I think you said preceding, when you maybe meant to say proceeding, unless I'm misunderstanding something, because I don't think something precedes objective morality. There's no, there's nothing that precedes that. It's when we judge people, this is a procession of something that after objective morality is already set in nature and those laws are in effect. When we judge others based off of our best understanding of what is objectively moral, the greatest objective moral in any given situation, the least amount of harm that is going to produce the biggest benefit of well-being, the biggest promotion of well-being that it's going to produce. That's the objective morality that we're looking for.
All right, that's going to have to be the answer. Objective, that was your answer to his question, right?
Yes, I hope that was satisfactory.
Okay. So yeah, that's going to have to be. We're going to have to wrap it up there either way. So what we are going to do, that was the 40 minutes of a moderated dialogue. I think you both did an excellent job in terms of your civility and, basically having a productive conversation. Now we are going to move into 5-minute closing statements. Each debate participant will have up to 5 minutes to basically summarize their thoughts on everything that was discussed tonight. They can do that however they want, but they have up to 5 minutes to do it. We're going to start.
I know.
Go ahead.
I hate to throw a wrench in this, but I know I conceded quite a bit of time in my opening statement, and especially in my cross-examination, I conceded some time as well. So if I go a little over 5 minutes, is that okay with you, Ray?
That's fine. Yeah.
Yeah, let's say 5 minutes loosely, but definitely try to keep it to like don't go 10 minutes. All right, you know what I'm saying? And Ray,
Okay,
the audio feedback is kind of starting to raise its head again for you, Ray. It's only when you're not talking though. So since we can mute you while ObjectiveEthics. But yeah, as far as timing, try to keep it to around 5 minutes. But if you also trying to go like 10 minutes. 10 minutes is definitely too long. So 6, 7, 8, somewhere in there maybe. Does that sound good, Objective?
I'll do the best I can.
Okay, so yeah, I'll just keep an eye on it, and if it seems like it's too excessive, then just keep awareness of the time is basically the objective. But all right, I'm going to remove me and Ray from the stage, and then when you will have your closing statement, I'll start the time when you begin speaking.
As I have effectively shown, not only is it possible to have a moral compass without a belief in any gods, objective morality is a natural law that we use to judge every action. The other thing that my theory does address, which is not addressed by any of the Abrahamic faiths, is human exceptionalism. We'll go ahead and skip past that since we never talked about it. Ultimately, my opponent has failed to provide an explanation for how God's morality is not subjective. In order to make any truth claims about the objective nature of the Abrahamic God, one must demonstrate 3 things. Number 1, you must first demonstrably demonstrate that the Abrahamic God exists. You cannot hide behind philosophy and argue your God into existence. This is just another logical fallacy known as reification or the definitional fallacy. Number 2, you cannot demonstrably demonstrate that the Abrahamic God did in fact communicate about the existence of a moral code that the Abrahamic God also adheres to. You must demonstrably demonstrate that the Abrahamic God does not have a mind or intention, so that any objective laws are not given, but rather they are observed as part of God's nature. Since my opponent has not been able to demonstrate any of the claims without engaging in logical fallacies, even though I asked him several times to do so, I think it is safe that we can simply reject any and all claims about God's objective morality. We do not need to apply objective morality to our lives, but we cannot deny that objective morality exists, as I have shown. And I think I'll go ahead and one final thing I did want to say. So just in closing, I want to reiterate that I am not out here to deconvert people. This is going to be a very difficult topic for me to approach honestly and intelligently without without pointing out some really, really ugly things that are found in the Bible. For anyone who wants to, I speak very quickly because of the time limit. So you'll have to go back and look at the Bible verses, the chapters, books, chapters, and verses that I cited. I encourage you to read the entire context so you understand where these things are coming from. We didn't have a chance to get into the contradictions, the internal contradictions about Jesus saying that you should keep the Mosaic law forever. He says he did not come to abolish the law, but Paul then comes along and says that the law has been abolished. I mean, the contradictions are so numerous that how is a person going to look at the Bible and actually extrapolate any kind of objective morality or any kind of objective standard? Well, they're not, which is why we have tens of thousands of different faiths that are just Christian faiths alone. So we have, over 8 billion, 8.5 billion people on this planet. 93% of them are religious. Not all of them are Christians. So obviously there's a disconnect somewhere with these claims that Ray's making. He was not able to connect any of these dots satisfactorily, in my opinion. I do appreciate Ray for taking the time to come and speak with me and for being so polite and respectful and cordial. And if he's interested in having any further discussions, I'm more than willing to. And I do look forward to hearing any feedback from the audience. And I appreciate, once again, A's for hosting this. And I thank you. I'll concede the rest of my time.
All right. Thank you for that closing statement, Objective Ethics. We are now going to move directly to Ray's up to 5 minute closing statement. We can be a little bit loose with that, but it's try to just keep that as a goal. So I will remove myself and Objective Ethics from the panel, and then when you start speaking, Ray, up to 5 minutes.
Okay, thank you. Objective Ethics is a kind person for the sake of dialogue, and I do respect that, as it is helpful doing internet discussions. He did admit that he was nervous, and I do appreciate that humility. He diverted into skepticism, which may or may not be something that has been a fruit of that, though, because the topic was objective morality, which he did pose. His premise is just that going into biblical skepticism on every point was not what we were supposed to be doing. However, though, it is something I'll be more than happy to do in piece and parcel, without doubt, because as I was able to show, he misrepresented the text from Isaiah 13, and he misrepresented the text about the two swords, and he made claims about nature having an inherent immoral faculty. So for whatever it's worth, you should very much consider Jesus Christ over whatever he has presented, because if you go with what he has presented, he says you will do immoral because you're human. What is the point? Now, he is correct that there is many false Christian denominations, circles, I call them cults myself, and they're going to use similar argumentation that he does, and they're just going to say they believe the Bible. So we know that there's an outside force guiding people like himself to believe that nature has immoral faculty, and even some to suggest that God is in Absalom sleeping with multiple women. And this is foolishness and folly, and it takes someone who is genuine about their morality to see past these sort of things. You have to understand it's the enemy trying to fool you. And that's why I had started with, you need the law and you need truth. If you just talk about morality and you start swinging like that, then this is how we know people are fraud. Just like if you were to tell your wife that you love her and you cheat on her, it's the right thing to do to tell someone you love them. You can claim it's moral to say something nice, to be kind, and then but your actions prove otherwise. And to misrepresent the Bible shows that. So again, he diverted from the debate itself. So from thence, what do you expect me to do? I mean, what I have to go along with the flow of it, and as well stick to what is true about morals, and that again says that there must be truth, so we can examine these things and judge them. And there's got to be a law, there's got to be a standard, because not everything is sin of itself, it's what you do. Okay, so again, a child dying is wrong if you kill the child. If God takes a life, it is not wrong. God is the one that has the jurisdiction, and we all know this deep down. As my opponent declared in his own very hypothetical on parenting, he knew that he had governance over that situation, which he was correct about. And I uphold his morality in that respect, that his neighbor cannot tell him what to do, and you cannot tell God what to do or what he cannot do. It's just the same premise. It's whether or not you believe. And I will yield.
All right. Thank you very much. Ray, I am sorry. I'm gonna have to mute you again. That feedback or muffling is really it gets progressively worse. But so I had to mute you again. Okay. Well, that concludes the interaction portion of our debate between the two participants. I think they did an excellent job of remaining civil and cordial to one another, while at the same time trying to advance toward truth in their conversation. Now, just to be clear, I want to lay some things out. There's a Q&A that we're going to have right now, and that is based on questions that came in the chat during the course of the conversation. There is also an after show, which is already linked on my YouTube channel. And after the Q&A is done for this debate on this stream, we are going to close down this stream and we are going to move to the after show where there will be a panel. Our debate participants can join if they want. They don't have to. But also other people can join and engage with the topic of the night, which is the best way to ground objective morality. So I just wanted to be clear about that. And I do want to say right now, I just want to plug my channel a little bit. Please like and subscribe for anyone who's here, who's watching. But all right, let's get to the Q&A. There weren't that many questions asked during the course of the debate, so this probably won't take very long. But basically, we will look at these questions, and I will give each of you a chance to respond to them. I know the questions are directed more to one person or the other, and that person will be the first one to respond, and then the other person can give their thoughts. Maybe try to keep responses to like 2-3 minutes, so we aren't here answering questions all night. And then we will, after you are done answering the questions, we will move to the after show, and we will see what happens there. Okay, so this is the first question. I would like to know if natural law morality is codified in Mithraistic's view. In Sir Ray's view, I would like to know if the law of Christ is the same universal law as at the time of Adam and under Noah and so on. So first, Mr. Objective Ethics, is your view of natural law codified is the question.
And codified in this regard here.
All I have is the question he asked. I assume, is there a place that people can go to look and see what your view of the law of the natural law is? I guess is the best way to think about it.
That's what I'm wondering. Yeah, that's what I'm wondering if you. So what I would reference you to is there's a litany of philosophy that's been done over this, and it goes back to Aristotle. He talks about the virtue, which is the state that is between excess and depravity. And it goes on from there. As I mentioned before, you can look at church fathers, how they've actually adopted this natural idea of what we're calling morality, starting with the Aristotelian view. And he added his own theological views of having to have a God behind this and this intelligent mind behind this. But he adopted the same premises that were already established of this natural law. So when I say it's codified, I would not say that necessarily, no, because this is all something that's been debated about, in philosophy. But there's a litany of resources that you can use to find out where this comes from. You can also review this debate, and I can even later on come into the comments and actually type my own hypothesis out with the premises and the conclusion.
Okay, thank you for that, Objective Ethics. I guess what we'll do, there are actually two questions here. One for Objective Ethics and one for Ray. So what we're going to do is, Ray, why don't you talk a little bit about what's already been said, this question of codification of the law, and then both of you will also have the chance to make a comment about the second part, which is whether the law of Christ is the same as the law that was given beforehand. So, Ray, respond to about the codification of law and why your view might be better for humanity.
Yeah, I think this is an excellent question. It was briefly touched upon, and something I had said during the debate is that the law of faith, it is codified, if you want, upon the heart of man. So from the time of Adam to the time that man will exist, which is for eternity's future, is that we have the culpability and we have inherently good nature, and all laws pertaining to morality stay the same. So then, therefore, when the Mosaic law was added at Sinai, it could not contradict anything moral. It did add what we would call carnal ordinances by the text of Scripture. Now, Mr. Objective Ethics, he talked about what Jesus says surrounding the Mosaic Law, and he was correct about what Jesus says surrounding the Mosaic Law. However, though, the Apostle Paul, he was incorrect about, because Paul only taught that Jesus abolished the Mosaic Law on the cross. Paul never taught that Jesus abrogated the law of faith, or as you put, the natural law of morality. So this is why Paul says we establish the law. And he referred to law of faith. And he says quite specifically, whatever is not of faith is sin. And that's why I would speak in this debate about law and truth as well as morality, because God is faithful, it says in the Word of God. So we have a standard of excellence. So whatever is not of faith is indeed sin. So great question. Takes probably a little bit more time, but I do appreciate it. Thank you.
Yes. And actually, okay, so there is a second question, and you will both have a chance to respond to it. But because it's directed to Ray, he will actually be the first one to respond to this question. And the question is,
Hold on. Did you say we're gonna be able to respond to the other response, or is that?
since this is Q&A, it's kind of just you get one shot, and then we're going to move on. But these questions can be addressed in the open panel. Does that sound okay to you, Objective?
However you guys want to do it, it's fine. I'm in your house. So I just want to try to figure out what's going on, but that's fine. I think we should be able to, frankly, address each other's response to the question. I think that's typical, but again, if Ray doesn't want to do that,
no, the problem with that is that gets back into a moderated discussion, and it
Sure.
can go on it could go on forever. So yeah, unfortunately, I'm just going to say, like, each person will get one crack at it, and then unfortunately, the order will depend on who is being asked the question. So since the question was
usually it would
asked,
be, I guess what I'm saying is usually, so that because there were actually two questions asked there, one to me and one to Ray, I think the way it would have been is I would have answered the codification, Ray would have responded to my answer, then he would have answered his part of the question, and I would have responded to his answer.
that's what we're doing. That's what we're doing. So now we're going to the second question about the second part of the question, and Ray will give his first answer, and then you will give your answer, and then we'll move on to the next question. Does that work?
Okay. Yeah, I thought you were going to move on from this entire chat here.
Yeah.
Okay.
No. Yeah.
My fault.
Yeah,
okay.
we're going to the second question, and the second question is this: because it's directed to Ray, he will respond first, then Objective Ethics. But the question is this: in Sir Ray's view, I would like to know if the law of Christ, and by the way, Taurus Necros Productions, thank you for being here. He has his own channel. We can go look at that. I would like to know if the law of Christ is the same universal law as the time of Adam and under Noah and so on. Okay, so that's the question. Ray, you will go first, and then Objective Ethics will give his thoughts.
Splendid, yeah. So I touched on it a little bit prior. Mr. Ethics, of course, we can do another debate maybe tomorrow on just one particular if you want to. So there's no harm in a time to laugh either. So in this question, we have what Paul teaches, of course, where there is no law, there is no transgression. And sin is not imputed where there is no law. So Adam sinned and Eve sinned. So those texts tell us there was law at that very time. Now, again, as I had stated, that the law entered, okay, when we talk about just the Mosaic law, of course. And if we stay to what the text of the scripture says, is that we know that Jesus Christ, he nailed it to the cross, okay? That's blood covenant theology. It's comprehensively taught to us in the book of Hebrews, and he took away the old covenant, but Jesus would never take away anything moral. It's in fact impossible. He cannot take away the moral law. So that's why we continuously see that Paul would teach law, okay? And that's why we're told that we must repent or we will perish, that we are to cease from sin. He that has suffered with him has indeed ceased from sin, because how would we know if we're sinning or not if there's no law? So we definitely still have law, and it is what Adam had. Yield.
All right, Ray, thank you. And Objective Ethics.
Yeah, I would say, so when we're talking about the law, as far as I'm concerned, and I think Ray and I are sort of on the same page with this, he takes it back to Adam. I do not. I take it to the law of Moses. That's where we have the codification, because I think that's what we're talking about here is the codification of the law. I take it back to the time of Moses. I do agree with Ray in the sense that Jesus was in fact a Jew who practiced the law and encouraged others to do so as well. The disconnect that I have is that it's quite clear in Matthew chapter 5, verses 17 through 20, that he says that the law, he did not come to abolish the law. That he didn't say anything about nailing the law to the cross. This is development in theology from Paul, which is why I think Christians are not Christians, they're actually Paulinists, frankly. But you look at all throughout after the Gospels, what is talked about that you have where am I at here? I would say you get, I know it's talked about in Galatians. I know it's talked about in Romans at least twice, if I remember right. Romans 6, chapter 6, verse 14, I think it is. Romans chapter 7. Galatians was chapter 2, verse 16. Ephesians chapter 2, verse 15. So we see Paul developing this theology, but it doesn't actually map onto what Jesus was actually teaching. The law will not pass away. Jesus, it's if you want to be seen as righteous in the kingdom of heaven, you will follow the law. If you want to be seen as least in the kingdom of heaven, that's when you teach others to not follow the law. We see that Jesus was this supposed pacifist was condemning the Pharisees for not stoning their children to death. So it's I don't see the connection between the Paul aspect of and the law. I do definitely see the connection that you can go from Jesus to Moses and the law of Moses. I think that's pretty clear.
All right, thank you very much. Next question is from Dirty Varmint, and it is directed to our objective ethics. Now you will go first, and then Ray will give his response. But objective ethics, did you say you said you would not punish people who sacrifice babies because other people have sacrificed babies? Do you want to? I guess he heard you say that. Do you agree with that?
No,
Did you say that?
he certainly did not hear me say that. Of course you punish babies. What I said is that if you're going to punish babies yourself, you are not morally justified to punish other people for drowning babies. So if you're going to murder babies, you can't go around and tell other people they can't murder babies. That's what I said. As far as punishing my child, what I said was that nobody is justified in my mind to punish my child in a way that I do not feel is that I should be punishing my child myself. So it comes down to the hypocrisy or the double standard, the special pleading fallacy that people make for the God of the Bible. I do not support that whatsoever. I think if it's bad for somebody to drown babies, it's bad for everybody to drown babies because it's objectively bad. And objectively means in all cases, including God.
Okay, since that was more of a clarification question, we're going to move on because it was really just Dirty Varmint trying to understand objective ethics point. But there are other questions for both of you that I saw. Let me see if I can find them again. Hopefully I do find them. Okay, let's see. This is also from Dirty Varmint. Okay, this is a question. This is an actual question for discussion. Is there any evidence that babies died during the flood, such as baby fossils, or is that just conjecture on your part?
I would certainly not say that it's conjecture. I think it's well accepted by every single biblical scholar. And I would also say that my opponent also agreed to that point. So I think that's kind of a nonsensical claim to say that there are no babies alive when the entire globe was flooded. That makes literally no sense. I mean, that's the kind of nonsensical apologetics that you get from Christians.
Okay. And Ray, do you have a thought on this matter, this question?
Yeah, I mean, perhaps he is asking for a text from the Bible speaking about it, which would be an interesting question. But I would also agree with objective ethics that it wouldn't make any sense to us that there was no children of infant age. I mean, it talked about even Jesus, he himself says they were marrying and given in marriage, and we know that there was a vast population. There were no hybrids. I would love to refute that idea, but yeah, I mean, there are definitely infants. I mean, there's no reason to think otherwise, of course.
All right. Taurus, muted you again, Ray, sorry. Taurus Necris Productions, how would you define naturalism for both? So let's start with objective ethics and then move to Ray.
Okay, so I would actually, as part of premise number one, that anything comports with reality is an objective truth. Reality is the natural world that we live in.
Okay, is that all you wanted to say?
Yep, that's it.
Okay, Ray, what is your understanding of naturalism? How do you think about it?
Yeah, so when we talk about nature, we have to consider the context. I would suppose he wants a biblical response. So if we're looking for anything nature-based in the text, it would be contextual. So if we're talking about something spiritual, for example, Ephesians 2 has always been used falsely, but if you're following Satan, the nature there is of wrath because you're following the devil, but the devil is someone that doesn't have a body, so it's based off of something nature based, but spiritual implication, metaphysical. So it's a good question, but it's going to take longer than 2 minutes. But we, by nature, we understand God's nature because we're God's image. So for me, the most important part to answer this would just be to provoke the thought of we have to be inherently good. Good can be there without evil, but when you have evil, there's got to be good. So evil came later. The opponent tonight is saying within nature itself, there is evil. And that we know is just something that comes after God. It's after fact.
All right, thank you for that. Follow up. I guess this is going back to okay. I guess this seems like more of a question that would be in Ray's line of thinking from Taurus Necros Productions. Follow up to this would be: how does God judge those outside of Israel, unaware of them? I guess this is talking about the law, unaware of the law before the incarnation. Is it better to be in Israel, and why? I know that's a huge question to answer in 2 minutes, but take a crack at it, Ray.
Fantastic question. In fact, it really helped with the last question he asked because Paul teaches this in Romans 2 that the Gentiles, which have not the law of Moses, but what they do is they do what is contained within the law of Moses on the moral front. These have a law in themselves. I'm just paraphrasing, but it's found in Romans 2, 13 through 15. And that's how they can accuse or excuse one another. Okay. So, what advantage then has the Jew? Paul also makes this point as well in the book of Romans, much chiefly because on them were committed the oracles of God. So, within the law of Moses, like it teaches in Malachi, that the law of truth would be upon the priests. So, in every teaching of God, there's something to be learned. So, the law of Moses added judicial matters, dealt with sin. Sort of what I thought Dirty Garment was asking a question for. I thought it was a viable question upon the sacrifice of children, and I think it was only fair that Objective Ethics was able to, reassert what he meant. But notwithstanding, it is true that if you believe in redemption, you are able then to carry out the judgment. So you're not a hypocrite anymore. And that is an advantage of the Jew because they were to rule their nation under the theocracy of God, which should have kept out immoral acts. But again, if we go by what we're talking about tonight, if immoral acts are within nature, we just do them because we're human, then the whole law of Moses itself is a fraud. It's a lie. It's setting you up to die. Whereas we know that it's impossible as a schoolmaster to bring us to Christ.
All right, Ray, thank you for that.
Yeah.
Now we're
So
objective. Well, hold on, objective ethics. Now you take 2-3 minutes to answer this very complex question. Thank you.
yeah, I don't think it's that complicated. Frankly, I think that this is a perfect example of how we can look at the world around Israel that was not in direct contact with Israel and see objective morality all over the place, even though they had no access to this Mosaic law. The assertion is being made and the presupposition is that God wrote this on everybody's heart, but that's not been demonstrated yet. So that's just an assertion. The natural law is something that every human being observes, and we can see this because the Mosaic law is nothing unique. There's nothing unique about what Jesus taught. There's nothing unique that's been presented in the Old Testament. The Old Testament laws go back to the Code of Hammurabi. Jesus' teachings about nonviolence are actually attributed to Buddhism long before Jesus was ever even a ever even born, much less conceived of, as far as I'm concerned. So these laws are all over the place. We see them throughout societies and developing independently and also at the same time collectively. There's an ebb and flow to it. So this is a perfect example of why we know that objective morality is a natural thing.
All right. Hold on. There was a question up here. Where was it? Hold on. I saw it. Sorry. Okay. So let's go here then. No. For Ray, I guess he wants to go back to the question of the law in the Bible. Quickly, this is a clarification question. Are there several laws? Which did Christ talk about? Please respond to that. This again, quick clarification. Objective. Is this what you meant?
For myself?
Actually, for Ray.
Oh.
Yeah, I don't know exactly if it was a question or a clarification, but it is something that was touched upon, that Jesus most certainly taught the Mosaic Law. So me and, well, myself, to speak correctly, and Mr. Ethics, we agreed upon that. Now, Mr. Ethics, the one thing that he was saying about what Jesus says is surrounding fulfillment of the Torah. Now, the critical thing is Jesus never taught that he came to be tortured, but rather he blamed the people for wanting him to be put to death. So then that's where we see the abrogation of the Torah. Jesus was perfectly fine teaching Torah, keeping Torah. He never broke Torah. And so myself and Mr. Ethics agree on that. It's just that the abrogation happened upon what they did to him. And this was good for us that those wicked Jews got taken out of power. And that's how Paul taught it. So the Gentiles have now been opened up to take the kingdom to reign.
All right. Thank you, Ray. Objective Ethics, do you have any thoughts on this question that we've kind of gone around on?
I think that Ray is correct. I think he represented that correctly as far as he and I's agreement and where we have a disconnect on that. And I think that was very well said. I agree with everything he said, that Jesus certainly was a Jew and he certainly did teach Torah. And I think if Jesus had lived forever, we would all be, encouraged to do the same thing.
Okay. Let's see if there are any more that I can find in the chat. There's a question about hybrids. All right, let's take a minute about hybrids. That this isn't really a part of this discussion, but maybe just quickly in a minute, Ray, give your understanding of. We don't have to labor on this. Just a quick thought about hybrids.
Oh yeah, I love this one because it confounds the cults that hold to it. So we believe, of course, kind brings forth after kind, and there is no possible way that an angel, okay, a demon, can have a body. And then, of course, I mean, if such pathology existed, then you have to double down and say they're able to impregnate a woman, and then that God would conceive this, obviously, if there was impregnating. So we go kind after kind, of course, and there's only one kind of flesh of men, as is taught, and animals have bodies, but angels do not. So the idea about the Nephilim, which is not in the Hebrew text at all, that it would mean a hybrid, and Nephel in the Hebrew text, it's all mythology. It's all a lie. It's science falsely so-called. Absolute lie. It's a blunder altogether.
Okay, I know you didn't really talk about this objective, but do you have a quick thought about hybrids in the Bible?
Yeah. Had I have known this is going to come up, I would have had a better citation, because where we get this idea that the Nephilim and the Anunnaki were actually these hybrids comes from the Enochian text, really. We do have a mention in Genesis chapter 6, I believe it is, verses 4 through wherever it goes. But he does say the Nephilim went out on the earth, and they came into the daughters of men, and so on and so forth, calls them the sons of God. But this is very vague language. So if somebody only read the Bible, the canonized text, and they didn't know where about the apocryphal books such as Enoch, First and Second Enoch, then they wouldn't really understand where this comes from, which is ironic to somebody who's a skeptic, because Enoch is quoted. In fact, a lot of the apocryphal books are actually quoted throughout the Bible, and yet the church decided to do away with them for whatever reason they came up with. So yeah, there is certainly some evidence out there that the Hebrews did believe that these were actually hybrid type creatures, and that this was some kind of a hybridized sexual interaction between humans and non-humans. But as far as the Hebrew Bible goes, if you take that sola scriptura, I would have to agree with Ray that it's at the very least, it's too vague to call them hybrids. I think you're almost, if you don't know the history of where that comes from, then if you just take the Bible for itself and reject everything apocryphal and reject the actual history, which in my opinion is a fallacious way of reasoning, and you're using the sharpshooter fallacy at that point. You're just taking what you want to use. But given the texts as they are, you take them at face value. I think that Ray is correct in at least justified, if not correct, but justified to say that.
Hey, thank you very much. Again, I think this is a question, again, going back to the law. What would a demonstration of God writing it on hearts look like? So I guess, again, that's probably going mostly to objective, and then, oh no, excuse me, Ray, and then we'll get objective's thought on that.
Yeah, great question, of course, again. So what it looks like is the simple fact, and a great example would be with the Pharisees, who by their own conscience left the situation at hand because of the fact that they were not doing accordingly. Okay, so their very conscience told them, and these were not saved men under the influence of the Spirit of God, the Holy Ghost. So the feeling that you have when you have done something wrong, and as well the feeling that you have when you have said no to a temptation, the good feeling that you have when you do something correct, if it's according to God's will in the light of Christ. So these are all different ways we can, feel this feeling, and it is extremely important that we examine our faith to that constantly, because we have to say no to temptation that Jesus Christ has provided a way out. So therefore, inherently, we must be good, so that right there, that it's there inside of us. Yield.
All right.
Yeah,
go ahead.
I would agree. So there's so much of what my opponent has articulated so well, and I would agree with that because it can be defined perfectly within the natural law of morality. Where we're having a disconnect here is that my opponent is adding, and Christians in general are adding, an unnecessary step without demonstrating that that step is actually necessary. So Occam's razor tells us that we observe that there is a inherent law that we all seem to understand for the most part, and that society is moving towards. That's the thing that we can agree on. In general, I would hope, and by abolishing slavery, for example, and committing, throwing people in prison for committing sexual assaults and whatnot, not encouraging people to do that type of behavior. The disconnect, like I said, is that there's no need to add extra steps unless you can demonstrate those steps are necessary, which I don't think has been done in over 3,000 years, personally.
All right, this will probably be the last question from the Q&A, and then we will close things down and move to the after show. So this comes again from Dirty Varmint. Dirty Varmint, thank you for being here and engaging. If Jesus kept Torah, does that mean he did animal sacrifices, or would that be conjecture? An interesting question. Why don't we start, because Ray is an adherent to the Bible, so maybe this would be more a question for you first, Ray, and then Objective Ethics will give his thoughts.
Yeah, I would agree. It's a very interesting question. Jesus, when healing the lepers, he did tell them to go to the priest. Okay. He said that and I'm just paraphrasing, but he was looking forward to having the Passover with the disciples. Okay. We know what happened at the Passover with the lamb, so on and so forth. So I would say that I am not aware of a text where he literally went through with a sacrifice that we're told, and it's spotlighted, but we have to assume any of the neutral sacrifices on feast days he did partake in. And of course, he never sinned, so we don't have to worry about him doing trespass offerings as it would pertain to someone who was found guilty of that. So great question. It's just that this would be something that is silent. So then we just go to what we would know, and that he kept feasts. So then he partook in those sacrifices.
So I would agree. I would agree wholeheartedly that Jesus was a practicing Jew, and we know that he did in fact keep all the commands of the Mosaic Law, which is why he tells us in Mark chapter 7, he condemns the Pharisees for not following the letter to the law, such as stoning disobedient children. And when you find that law, you go back to Leviticus chapter 20, verse 9. So we could certainly see in the text that Jesus would not only command but recommend stoning of disobedient children, which is part of the Mosaic Law.
Okay. Hold on one second. All right, that is going to be the last question for now. But for anyone who wants to continue the conversation, you will have an opportunity, because there is going to be an after show. The second I end this stream, I will move to the after show, which is already posted on my channel. So you can just click on that second stream and it will get started shortly. But I would like to thank Objective Ethics and Ray for participating in this debate about grounding of objective morality. We've already given concluding statements. I guess just both of you take maybe 30 seconds just to give your final thoughts. Nothing, no more arguments. Just give your final thoughts and some parting words for the audience, and then we'll close things down. We'll start with Objective Ethics and then go to Ray.
Oh, I think everything has been said. I don't have it. Like I said, I don't have any more arguments to make. I do want to just thank everybody once again. I'd like to thank the audience for participating, and I would also like to just reach out and thank everybody who's going to watch this video in the future. You could certainly post comments in this thread, this chat or comment section, whatever it's called, after the fact, and it'll send me a notification if they're addressed to me specifically, and I will do my best to try and respond to any direct questions. I have no problem with that. And if you need to, engage in ad hominem and whatever because you're very offended about the way I've talked about your religion, I completely understand. I will tolerate that at least to a certain degree, but it's going to be on a short leash.
Sorry about that. Okay, Ray, any final thoughts?
Yeah, even if you troll Mr. Ethics, I will condemn you to hellfire because trolls are definitely of the serpent. I like to just say Mr. Ethics has been compatible for this discussion as far as on a man-to-man level, and it is something that I do respect. And I do feel as if we need to have a debate on one single topic, and it could be something that he spoke of or I spoke of that we could agree upon and really hammer down on one thing. And I think the skepticism of the Bible would be the best place for us to go, because as he even illustrates that we do have agreement on morality being there, and because a lot of the time from agnostics and atheists it's relativism, and he would probably say the same thing. I mean, that's all that I ever hear about from agnostics and atheists is relativism. So if we really do care about morality, we should see if the Bible can harmonize or not, and just really dig down deep into these questions about children dying or stoning of adult children who are drunks and rebellious. And did Jesus really tell Pharisees to kill their children and so on and so forth? We should really look at these things. And I think he and I would be, a good pair to do that.
All right, thank you very much. I'm going to remove you all from the stream, but and I'm going to give some final parting words of my own, and then we'll go to the after show. All right, so thank you. All right. First of all, I'm not going to say very much. I want to thank everyone who watched the debate, participated in the debate, asked questions from the audience. Please like and subscribe, because I plan on doing more content like this, having conversations, not necessarily even just debates, but we also many times have open panels on my channel where we can discuss things like this, skepticism. I used to just debate Christian theology most of the time, but we can do that as well. Like, obviously the skeptics aren't going to be very interested in that because they don't believe in any of it. But I have a very great interest in Christian theology and doctrines, salvation, soteriology, Christology, all that stuff. Approach to the Bible, epistemology, philosophy, evolution, all these things we discuss. So thank you very much. We're going to close the stream. And once again, there's an after show for those who are with us live right now. Thank you very much.